What is going on, guys, gals, non-binary pals? It's your boy Artisan Kane here. We are doing another TPL OU tourney recap, I guess. This tournament happened maybe a week or two ago at this point. I just wanted to get around to uploading all the content on how the rounds went and how we performed in it. So last video I uploaded was against Nadra. I'll leave a link in the description for that video. And in this next round, we played against Extreme Valor. And I will start out here with a quick team overview. This was an OU tournament, just as a refresher. So we brought some pretty standard mons as far as what the OU meta game currently looks like. Keep in mind, this is before all the Crown Tundra stuff, so this is still looking like what the OU meta looks like in early October here. So starting off, we have a heavy duty boot Zero Aura, mainly to make sure that we can put some offensive pressure. We're running a bulk upset, Plasma Fist, and Close Combat as our two primary striking options, and then Volt Switch to get some momentum there. We're running Jolly, Max Attack, Max Speed up. Pretty standard bulk upset for Zero Aura. Often runs Life Orb, but I prefer the heavy duty boot so I don't have to worry about those hazards coming in and out. Next is a Scarf Dragapult. I really like this variation of Dragapult in the current meta. It puts a lot of pressure on the other team because you outspeed just about everything besides like other Scarf Dragapults. So we're running special attack and a whole bunch of speed. Obviously, we're going to be timid to make sure we max out the speed. So worst case scenario, we speed tie with another Scarf Dragapult. Draco Meteor, Shadow Ball, Fire Blast, and then U-Turn also for momentum. Next, we have the current metagame's biggest kind of mover and shaker right now is Rillaboom. I'm running a Life Orb set, Swords Dance, Grassy Glide, and U-Turn. And for the fourth move, we actually went with High Horsepower. I like High Horsepower because it threatens a lot of other Zero Auras that can be running around. I sometimes run Superpower, but I've had a lot more success running High Horsepower recently. So we'll keep with that. We are an adamant nature, so we have to keep that in mind if we're playing against other Rillabooms. There is a potential for the opposing Rillaboom to outspeed us. Next, we've kind of got our three defensive core mons. Toxapex running Regenerator, Black Sludge, knockoff Scald, Recover, and Toxic. I messed around with the idea of Toxic Spikes or Baneful Bunker, but I really like the versatility of knockoff, especially. Toxapex puts a lot of pressure on the opposing team. It kind of forces a lot of switches. So knockoff kind of helps punish those switches. So when something else switches into Toxapex, we can get rid of its item, whether it's a recovery item that'll have a lot of longevity like a Leftovers or Black Sludge, or something that'll have a lot more offensive pressure, like getting rid of something's Life Orb, getting rid of something's Specs or Band, that type of deal. Next, it should be mentioned that we are running Max Spadef, and we're not running much defense on it, and that's because of our next mon here, Hippowdon. Hippowdon's kind of our main physical defense threat, max HP and 240 defense. We wanted a little bit of attack investment to make sure that our Earthquakes hit hard, but it should be mentioned that EQ is weakened by grassy terrain that Rillaboom sets, so Hippowdon really isn't that much of a physical attack threat. It's mainly there to get off those rocks, see if we can stall something out with the Toxic Slack Off combination, and just kind of sponge some of those hits. And that Rocky helmet will help do some of the chip damage needed for some of those strong attackers. And then finally, we've got Lefty's Corviknight, Brave Bird, Defog, Roost, and U-Turn. Kind of more of a utility mon. It does hit hard with Brave Bird, but for the most part, we want to make sure that we can defog hazards away that the opponent is setting. We can roost off a lot of damage, and then we can U-turn in and out to some of our other heavier hitters. So with that, we will get into here our game against Extreme Valor. So let's switch this around here. Okay, perfect. So as you can see here, his team is very similar to mine in composition as far as having 3 of the same mons. But if we do a quick left to right analysis, we can see that Volcarona is probably his biggest threat against my team. Our special defense walls of Toxapex and Corviknight really don't take the fiery dances or flamethrowers, fire blasts for Corviknight obviously, or it has access to psychic that it runs a lot specifically for Toxapex. So Volcaronas are a very big threat. It should also be noted that because we have a lot of similar mons, some of these speed tiers might be interesting to see. Like the Zero Auras, for example, since we are the Jolly max speed, and Rillaboom, since we are adamant with a lot of speed, they might end up with different speed tiers because of that, depending on what kind of sets and EV spreads that he decides to run. It's also interesting that he brought the Galarian Weezing. It's an interesting mod. It's one of my favorite mods of this gen, being the Poison Fairy mod that it is. The Neutralizing Gas is a really cool ability, specifically for the Regenerator Pokemon. It makes sure that I don't get that regen if I'm coming in and out. That's something to keep in mind here when we have Toxapex. Also, the Urshifu, it hits like a freight train. Really, other than Hippowdon, nothing really takes those critical hit wicked blows that well at all, to be honest, even if it's resisted. So we have to keep that in mind with that mod. So otherwise, I think our team is in a really good position. Dragapult can definitely outspeed just about everything, or it will outspeed everything, so we can get some of those heavy hits off. Zero Aura is decent in this matchup. Obviously, Rillaboom will be resisting its primary attacking moves, so we have to keep that in mind. But for the most part, I besides Volcarona, I think we match up pretty well against this. So with that, we will lead off the game. So he decides to start with Urshifu, and it is the dark fighting variant, kind of the more common one, so it can just kind of spam wicked blows. So with Zero Aura out on the field first, I figured this was kind of a safer play. We can just volt switch on whatever he puts out there if we don't like the matchup, and that's what we decide to do here. But he is actually scarfed, so we take 1,000,000,000% on Zero Aura, and that is humongous, because right off the bat, he has a lot of momentum on his side, because Zero Aura really can't come in on too much else. So we need to make sure we can take care of this Urshifu. So since it is locked into that, I threaten with Toxapex because I want to get a knockoff, and we click knockoff. I figured he might just kind of go for another wicked blow, and even though we are not running a physically defensive Toxapex, we would have been able to take at least one, get a knockoff, and then we can switch out and get some recovery. But he decides to switch, and we get a knockoff on the Toxapex anyways, which is great. We get rid of its black sludge, but we don't want to stay in on that, especially if it hits us back with a knockoff, and whatnot. So we go ahead and switch out. I didn't want to just play the Toxapex game having two Toxapex stare at each other. That sucks. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody has fun with that. So we end up going with Corviknight, trying to put a little bit more pressure on it. Obviously, depending on the EV spread is going to depend on how much damage it actually takes with any sort of Brave Bird. But I also wanted to make sure that it wasn't just getting up T-spikes for free and that we can defog those away. I also like the pressure on Corviknight. We can try to get rid of Toxapex's PP early, especially if it's going for a bunch of baneful bunkers and whatnot. And we actually do end up forcing a switch, which is interesting going into Rillaboom. I'm not entirely sure what he was expecting here, to end up forcing that switch, but he actually doubles, so that might have been like a misclick or something, to be honest, because I mean anytime I see Corviknight and I've got my Rillaboom in there, it's not really a matchup I want to keep going, especially if the Corviknight's a physical variant. So he ends up going back into Galarian Weezing there. So we clicked Brave Bird because, again, I didn't know what the Rillaboom was trying to do, and I figured this Brave Bird was pretty free. And for the most part, it was. It does an okay chunk, but the recoil is never nice. Having leftovers is good, but it is black sludge, and with the terrain also, it basically, does only half of that damage ends up actually sticking around because of all that recovery. So with that, we decided to go into Hippowdon, try to see if we can get our rocks up. Now I realize that Galarian Weezing has access to defog, so I wanted to just see if I can get rocks up and see if I can get it to defog, get rid of this grassy terrain. And then we get our rocks up there for free. So on the Toxapex switch in, we do get our rocks, which is fine. What I was actually trying to bait out was a defog there. Defog also gets rid of the terrain, so that would have allowed our earthquakes to hit harder. But we'll take those free rocks. That means that because the Galarian Weezing was holding Black Sludge, it's not holding the boots. So if it switches in to try to get rid of the rocks later in the game, it's taking that chip damage, which is always nice. And now we have Sandstorm up to do chip damage on his entire team because he doesn't have any steel ground or rock mons. So that's nice. So we get that little bit of healing, but obviously we don't want to be staying in on that Toxapex. Scald is going to hit really hard, even though it's not really that strong, because we have a lot of investment in defense and not in special defense. Really don't want to be taking those. So I put Corviknight out there, even though we really don't want Corviknight to be burned, but Corviknight can take those Scalds. So we have, since we're running leftovers, that's a nice little recovery there. Obviously we're not affected by the Sandstorm. So that's nice. Obviously we knocked off the Black Sludge earlier on the Toxapex, so it's lacking some of the recovery stuff. Baneful Bunker again, maybe he was predicting that I would switch out or something, but Corviknight obviously doesn't care about that being a steel type. It's not going to get poisoned. So we end up just clicking here. So here we do click Brave Bird. We do a nice little chunk again. Having the sand chip and the rock chip is nice on this Weezing. We definitely want to start whittling it down. It is a pain in the butt. I believe the only regen it gets as far as getting health back is through Pain Split. So that's something to keep in mind also, but we really do want to whittle this down as much as we can. Obviously he has access to flamethrower, so it's not something Corviknight wants to see. So we go back out into Toxapex, and he does uh, defog, which is fine. Um, we can get a free knockoff again, since Weezing couldn't really do anything to Toxapex. Um, so that's nice that we get the knockoff on the Zero Aura. We can get a little bit of information on its set based on the item. So it was a Life Orb set, so it's probably running a similar set that to I am. It's probably running something like this with the Plasma Fist bulk up, maybe a CC. I know sometimes Zero Auras also like to run Grass Knot, specifically for Hippowdon, stuff like that. So that's really good info to have. So obviously we don't want to have Toxapex out there up in front of Zero Aura. Plasma Fist will absolutely obliterate it. So and because of that potential for the Grass Knot, we don't want to go into Hippowdon either. So we decided to go into Rillaboom here. If he decides to Plasma Fist, we resist that and we take it decently. And he actually bulks up, which is not great. But on this Rillaboom set, like I mentioned earlier, we are running high horsepower, so we threaten it pretty well. Zero Aura really doesn't have anything that hits me that hard even after the bulk up. So with that in mind, we can still hit pretty hard here. So we want to get that Swords Dance because that's, you know, free extra damage, because we know that bulk up is basically going nowhere. But with that being said, we can hit that high horsepower. Now, this is kind of one of the main reasons why I love having this high horsepower on this set instead of the superpower, and that's probably the only reason why he let Weezing go in at that point. I figured this Weezing probably did have Flamethrower, or at least threaten it, even if he was bluffing the Flamethrower. Knowing that it had it, he probably didn't expect me to have the high horsepower and go for it. So this is awesome. We get rid of Weezing, which is one of the of the two bulkiest mons on his team. We get rid of that right off the bat, which is absolutely fantastic. And now he goes into his own Rillaboom, which I kind of understand, because he doesn't want me to try to like Grassy Glide any of the rest of his team after the +2. So we do Swords Dance, so we do U-turn after that Swords Dance, which means that, we have to return, obviously. But that +2 U-turn is just absolutely obliterating the opposing Rillaboom. So now we are up 2-0, which is fantastic. We decided to go into Dragapult here. Primary reason is because it is Scarfed, it puts a whole bunch of offensive pressure on his team. We have seen that the Urshifu is Scarfed, but even though it is Scarfed, it's still only, I believe, a 97 base speed, so we still outspeed it if we want to stay in. But I don't want to take a Wicked Blow. I'm not sure if any of my moves can Oko the Urshifu at this range. If maybe I did a little bit more calcs, I would have known that. But because we are running the Scarf set Timid, yeah, we are Timid. I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to be able to Oko, and if we didn't Oko, Wicked Blow was definitely gonna revenge kill Dragapult, and I didn't want Dragapult to go down that easily. So we decided to go into Corviknight here. We take 51 on the Wicked Blow, which is not great, but because of that 51, I figured even if that's a low roll, getting the extra percentages back from the leftovers, we should be able to take at least one more and revenge kill with Brave Bird. So that's exactly what we decide to do here. He goes Wicked Blow. We get a low roll of 49%, which allows us to hit the Brave Bird, knock it out. We do go down also, but I will 100% take that trade every day of the week, Corviknight for that Urshifu. Now, this does welcome in Volcarona. with no rocks up or anything, even though I assume it's heavy duty boost anyways. So we kind of have to figure out what the hell we're gonna do to it. I figure we can just go for damage right off the bat, just to try to do some chip on this thing. Close combat, obviously it's resisted, does 30%. Now Volcarona, we kind of allow Volcarona here to go on a tear. That QD is absolutely brutal. It's going to be able to get the fiery dance off. Psychic does more than half, which absolutely stinks. Scald isn't going to do that much because of that special defense boost. So at this point, we kind of have to we decide to just sack off Toxapex. If we look at the rest of his lineup, there's really not much Toxapex does here except stall out the other Toxapex. So it's not really an end game we want to play. So we decided to just sack off Toxapex, go into Hippowdon. I know we're not especially defensive Hippowdon, but we want to get that sand up, do the extra chip, do whatever we can to get the Volcarona down on HP. Bug Buzz does hit like a freight train, and it's not great because now a really good Zero Aura check is down. We don't know if it's running anything like the Grass Knot, but now we've got Dragapult in. We're a special attacker. It's already got an increased special defense, so we know we can do a decent chunk. But again, if we were like Specs or something, that definitely would have killed. But because of the set we're running, we wanted to just get off as much damage as we could. And we're going to get some help here from the sand, but that Bug Buzz is going to do a whole lot. So at this point, we decide to switch into Zero Aura, just sack off Zero Aura. We know Volcarona is going to go down to the sand. We want to keep Dragapult healthy just in case we can try to revenge kill some of these other mons. Zero Aura doesn't really do much against the opposing Zero Aura, so we just decide to sack it off and let the Volk go down to the sand. So at this point we are actually tied 2-2. He has basically 2 balance because he's got a lot of defense and a lot of offense, and I am in a position where I have a whole bunch of offense. So with that, I decided to go into Rillaboom. Neither of these mons can take that. As we revealed earlier, having that high horsepower is awesome. It's kind of obvious here that the Toxapex is going to want to do like some Baneful Bunkers or Toxics or whatnot. So I decided to go for a Swords Dance because Toxapex isn't threatening us with the Scalds that it might use. Even if it burns us, we'll still be at neutral because of the +2. So that's why we decided to Swords Dance. And now here we can just go. So Baneful Bunker again. Okay. Again, it was kind of expected because having that poison is decent for him, but it can't just keep clicking Baneful Bunker and expect to win out the game. So he does get the poison, but I can just click Grassy Glide again and absolutely destroy it in this next move. We do. And now Zero Aura comes out. Plasma Fist is resisted. It's not going to do enough. And we're going to hit with high horsepower and kill it. And with that, we win 2-0 against Extreme Valor. It was a really good game. I think there were some turns I definitely could have played better. I think he did have a misplay there, or not necessarily a misplay, actually a misclick in going into, who was it, like Wheezing or something when he didn't mean to, or going into Rillaboom when he didn't mean to and he meant to go into the Galarian Wheezing instead of the Rillaboom. So that, I think that was something that kind of gave me a little bit more momentum and definitely helped in our positioning. So he had to play around that. But I think we played decently. This really wasn't too much of a finesse team or anything like that. Pretty standard stuff. I really did like his Scarfed Urshifu. I mean, I definitely didn't expect it turn one, and it basically put a whole bunch of pressure on me not being able to bring Zero Aura out as much as I wanted to in this matchup because of it. And I knew creating this team that we were kind of weak to Volcarona. Um, but of course, I was like, he probably won't even bring him on like Volk. He'll probably bring something else, something more with more finesse or whatever. And of course, that's what we end up seeing is Volk, and we really didn't have much of an answer for it, and we had to sack off what was it, like 2 or 3 mons to it in order to get it down. But in any case, we won the second round, and we go on here. I believe round three ended up being the semifinals. So I will do another one of these videos, and we will